Hi, my name is Yulia, and this is the News Brief. Here we catch up with several news stories twice a week, and then we discuss them in the comments, so you don't have to suffer alone, and I don't have to suffer alone. And also, please, as always, do comment your questions, suggestions, and criticism, because I always read it, and I love to know what you guys think. Anyways, let's get it. As I mentioned in the previous episode, we're going to be doing the news brief a little bit differently than what you're used to, if you have been watching it for a while now, and if you're new here, well, welcome. We're going to be dividing the news brief into three sections now. It's going to be Ukraine axis, Russia axis, unfortunately, and the Western axis. So the news is going to be grouped into three categories for easier understanding, and we're going to be starting with Ukraine axis. Today, the night in Ukraine was brutal. As I've mentioned priorly, and as you might know, I had just come back from the United States from a month being there, and I am still adjusting to the time zones and to life here all over again. Last night, I woke up probably 55 times in total because there have been drones that were taken down by the air defense. And every time a drone was shot down, I was kind of like bordering between a delirium of understanding whether it was actually a loud bang because something was taken down by air defense, or I was, dreaming it. My dog was barking really loudly. So I was kind of in a state of an absolute nightmare, and so was everybody else in Kyiv and in the rest of Ukraine. There was a barrage of drones that was coming onto our country last night, and these attacks have only intensified in the past 2 to 3 weeks, and they have become worse than they have ever been. Because now, instead of 2, 3, 4, 5 UAVs, we get about 10 to 15 at a time. And they do cause a lot of damage even if they get shot down because debris falls and ruins buildings or, hits people or infrastructure or electric cables. And unfortunately, last night there were some casualties in Kyiv. Following an attack by Russian UAVs on Kyiv, debris fell in the Solominsky and Svetoshinsky districts. A fire broke out in a residential building, with cars and a commercial property also catching fire. 6 people were injured. And I always stress this information because I don't think we often think about it, but shut down does not mean casualty free. So when you hear that a missile gets intercepted or all the missiles were intercepted except for 2, it's not damage from 2 missiles that we have experienced. It's damage from all of them. It's just the 2 that weren't intercepted is of a much greater magnitude of damage. So even if we shoot down 15 out of 15 Shaheds, the debris from those 15 Shaheds has to land somewhere, and it usually lands on residential properties. And when Russia strikes, they also strike residential properties. So it's never rainbows and butterflies. It always followed by chaos and horror. And it's really hard to live like that. In other news, Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi recently visited the units defending the Zaporizhzhia region to bolster their resilience at critical frontline positions. The visit focused on enhancing defense in challenging areas and fortifying the stability of defense lines. During the visit, Syrskyi met with brigade commanders, conducting a thorough analysis of combat conditions and assessing the provision of essential supplies, including ammunition, UAVs, and electronic warfare devices, otherwise known as EW. He also took steps to ensure that units would receive additional weapons, equipment, and essential resources for the autumn-winter period, underscoring efforts to maintain strong defenses throughout the coming months. Winter is coming, and all of the areas of the front line are going to be incredibly harrowing. And so, of course, outside of just, low ammunition supplies and exhaustion and our warriors just being completely and utterly, morally destroyed because it's been so long, winter is a very, very, very tough period to conduct warfare. Again, everyone's tired. It's been 2.5 years of war. Everyone's exhausted. People are underslept. It's also going to be incredibly cold. This is a very good time to donate to organizations that collect supplies for soldiers, such as socks or mittens or various different warming layers. If you don't want to donate because you don't trust these organizations, you can send care packages that include, literally socks, underwear, thermal layers, and I keep forgetting what you call these things, but they're these like little sachets, I would say, that turn very hot if you rub them. So those things are very important and very useful too. And yeah, I just wanted to mention it because, one of the reasons why Syrskyi is going to that area front is because actions are intensifying there. And the season, unfortunately, is not helping. Winter is a very, very terrible season for war. Not that any season is great for war, but winter is just especially horrible. President Volodymyr Zelensky held a conversation with South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol discussing North Korea's involvement in Russia's war against Ukraine. They emphasized that the conflict has now extended beyond a bilateral struggle, signaling broader regional and global implications. Which, again, I mean, winter is coming, actions are intensifying, and North Korea is joining the fight. So nothing looks good for what the front line is looking right now. Zelensky informed Yoon that around 3,000 North Korean soldiers have already been moved to Russian training grounds near conflict areas, with projections that this number may increase to 12,000. In response to this escalation, Ukraine and South Korea agreed to strengthen their intelligence sharing and exchange expertise to formulate a joint strategic response. The two countries plan to exchange delegations soon to facilitate this cooperation. A South Korean delegation is set to visit Ukraine this week to discuss the deployment of North Korean troops to Russia and explore cooperative measures, according to Yonhap. President Yoon Suk-yeol noted that North Korean troop deployments might occur sooner than initially anticipated. During their visit, the delegation also updated the EU Security Committee on the developments. President Yoon voiced his hope that NATO will intensify monitoring efforts to track illegal exchanges between Russia and North Korea, reflecting growing regional concerns over the implications of this cooperation. It's interesting because South Korea seems to be the only country that's taking this cooperation, so to speak, seriously. And honestly, I think that one of Russia's biggest miscalculations in employing North Korea and their soldiers in, their unjust fight against Ukraine and their illegal invasion is that they miscalculated that South Korea is going to actually join in, because for South Korea, North Korea doing any sort of military action anywhere is not a good move. South Korea is an incredibly strong country militarily, and they produce fantastic military equipment. Prior to this update, South Korea was not necessarily providing Ukraine with lethal aid, but now they're reconsidering, and that might be a very big problem for Putin and a very huge miscalculation on their behalf. Because if South Korea starts sending us equipment, oh boy, that's some good equipment. A South Korean intelligence report reveals that most North Korean soldiers sent to fight in Ukraine are in their 20s. Despite their youth, they should not be underestimated, as all have received at least basic military training. I mean, for now, actually, this assessment is probably not necessarily correct, because we have seen reports of these North Korean soldiers having trouble figuring out advanced Russian tech. We talked about it in our previous episode, because apparently old Soviet weapons are advanced tech for North Koreans, which is kind of funny and kind of sad at the same time. So for now, I mean, they're very undertrained, they're also very young, and they don't know where they are, and they don't know what they're doing. But that's not going to last forever. So yes, I do agree on the do not underestimate them part. But for now, they do not pose a lot of threat. They just pose threat in numbers, and those are still soldiers that need to be taken out of the battle. And that, of course, causes more trouble and more effort for Ukraine. Another piece of news that came out of Ukraine today is very harrowing and very disappointing, but of course it's not surprising. Explosive contamination affects 128,000 square kilometers of land and 14,000 square kilometers of waters in Ukraine, according to Ministry of Defense. This contamination is a direct result of Russia's large-scale invasion, significantly impacting civilian safety, agriculture, industry, and socioeconomic growth in affected regions, the report states. According to Ruslan Barahula, head of the main directorate of Mine Action, these risks impact the lives of over 6 million Ukrainians. I mean, it also impacts climate change. There are a lot of people, both on the far right and on the far left, that are so against Ukraine, and they're so sympathetic to Russia. And of course, there are tankies and commies and all of that other fantastic crowd. But what pisses me off and kind of makes me just like confused to the brim of no return, usually with these activists, is the people on the far left. I mean, those people that advocate severely for climate change. They advocate for, climate action and they advocate for the environment, and they're these sort of like hippie characters, right? Do you guys understand that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is causing detrimental damage to the environment and it's speeding up global warming? Because it seems to me like these people just kind of gloss over the fact that there are bombs and missiles and drones, all, explosive equipment, falling onto a territory of a very large country in Europe. There are waters being contaminated. There is sea life and ocean life dying. There is wildlife dying. There are plants that are becoming extinct. All of that is environmental activism. So how hypocritical of these activists is it to support Russia and not care about Ukraine, yet say that they care about environment so much? Well, maybe do start caring about the environment and educate yourself on what you are supporting and what you're not supporting. Because if you're such an advocate for clean environment and for recycling and for clean energy and, for slowing down the global warming, then maybe you should start with Ukraine, and maybe you should start with not supporting Russia and condemning Russia, because it contributes quite significantly to the issues that you so care about. Moving on to our next section, which is the Western axis or the world axis. And here are some things that have been happening around the world. And surprisingly, they are positive updates for Ukraine, because it seems like the world is finally catching up a little bit and providing Ukraine with aid that we need. Still not enough, a little too late, but the gears are turning. Croatia has reached an agreement with Germany to supply Ukraine with 60 military vehicles, including 30 M84 tanks and 30 M80 infantry fighting vehicles, along with spare parts and ammunition. In return, Germany will provide financial assistance to Croatia, which will be used to acquire up to 50 Leopard 2A8 tanks. The total cost of the new Leopard tank will be offset by the compensation Germany provides for Croatia's transferred equipment. And Croatia has announced that it will supply Ukraine with those tanks and confirmed it, along with spare parts and ammunition from its stockpiles. The agreement was formalized during a meeting in Berlin between Croatian Defense Minister Ivan Anušić and German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, where both ministers signed a letter of intent. Under this arrangement, the financial support provided by Germany to Croatia for the initial equipment transfer to Ukraine will offset the total cost of Croatia's Leopard 2A8 acquisition. This agreement structure benefits all three involved nations, Croatia, Germany, and Ukraine, by supporting Ukraine's defense against Russian aggression while enhancing Croatia's military capabilities, Minister Anušić stated. Further details will be shared upon contract signing. So not right now, and that's good that these details are not being made public. Honestly, it kind of worries me when countries share absolutely everything about their packages of support, especially defense packages of support, because that just gives Russia more information and more ammunition, informational ammunition, not real ammunition that they get from North Korea, mostly. But anyways, moving on. I respect the decision to keep those weapons transfers private and keeping this information behind closed doors until it actually happens, because why would we give Russia more info than they already have? Romania's Ministry of Defense has prepared a draft law permitting the downing of drones that violate the country's airspace. Finally, I don't know if it's going to happen, but it looks like since North Korean soldiers joining Russian army has been announced, a lot of countries have started talking about downing targets on approach to their countries that border Ukraine. And that is very good. That's something that we've been asking for a while. It's good for us. It's good for our neighboring countries, because nothing will be falling on their territory and nothing will be, posing danger to them. And it'll also free up our air defense in other places so it doesn't have to concentrate on border areas. This move comes amid growing concerns about unauthorized drones potentially posing security threats. The ministry emphasized that discussions at the EU level are ongoing to develop a unified approach for addressing drone-related risks and countermeasures. This draft law aims to strengthen Romania's defenses and aligns with broader efforts to ensure airspace security across Europe. So that's good. It's also very good, provided that we have just received very bad news from the Pentagon, literally just this morning. They have been reviewing their capabilities of manufacturing drone interceptor missiles and generally interceptor missiles, and it doesn't look good. So, supplying Ukraine with interceptor missiles is going to get more and more challenging as the war goes on. Therefore, it is so crucial and so important to start engaging those interceptor missiles that already exist in very large number in European countries. The Pentagon and defense experts in the United States are increasingly concerned about a potential shortage of interceptor missiles critical for air defense systems. The Wall Street Journal reports that the wear and use of these missiles have accelerated, outpacing current production rates. And I mean, that's been going on for a while, and honestly, sometimes when I read these assessments, I'm kind of like, really? Really? You have just gotten to that conclusion 2.5 years after? I mean, you see the pace with which these missiles are being used because Russia barrages us like every day. I mean, literally every day and every night. I don't think there has been a day without an air raid since I've come back on Thursday. And I don't think there has been a day without an air raid the entirety of the time that I was in New York. My watch just kept going off with alerts. But anyways, point is that we knew that this was going to happen, and it shocks me that we are only now coming to these conclusions because all of these things could be predicted, and they are not surprising. What is also not surprising is Viktor Orban and his behavior in Georgia, and his speeches and his support for Russia in a country that is currently experiencing a Russian invasion into their government times 10, because I mean, they've had that going on for years, and now there might actually be a Maidan or a revolution, because it looks like the Georgian Dream Party, or actually, I would prefer to call it the Russian Dream Party, has won the election in Georgia. And Orban obviously immediately jumped on a plane to do Russia's bidding there. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, during a press conference in Tbilisi, praised Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, and its government for what he called their choice to prioritize peace by preventing Georgia from becoming a second Ukraine. Orban emphasized that, in his view, the Georgian government had wisely avoided involvement in the ongoing senseless war in Ukraine. Orban further expressed appreciation from Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili's approach to European integration, suggesting that by the end of the decade, Georgia would be prepared for EU membership in its best form. This statement aligns with Orban's stance of fostering ties with Russia and his consistent advocacy for alternative foreign policy approaches within the EU. Of course, Orban would love to have another buddy-buddy Russian shill in the EU. The issue is that with this Georgian Dream ruling party that is very evidently Russian puppets, Georgia is not going to enter the EU. And the reason for the people being so upset and so pissed off and protesting is because A, they know that, B, they don't want Russian shills in their government. And of course, it's so comical that no one in the world is supporting this in the free world, except for Orban, you know, EU's little enemy from within, who is consistently doing Russia's bidding and standing against all the principles that the free Western world stands for. Seriously, can we exclude him from the EU at this point? There needs to be some sort of a special procedure where a country is being kicked off for legitimately being an undemocratic dictatorship that supports dictatorships and fascism and just, you know, Russia not complying with laws worldwide. Yeah, I cannot believe it. I mean, I can because it's been going on for so long, but every single time I think about it, I genuinely cannot believe how we have Orban and his Hungary still in the EU, knowing, because he's not even hiding it, that he's quite literally pro-Russian and Russia's friend. And he's constantly blackmailing the EU policymakers to help Russia. Fun. Something interesting has happened, though, in the US. Something that is very unlike Joe Biden. He stated that Ukraine should retaliate if North Korean troops enter its territories, according to Reuters. I am concerned about the presence of North Korean troops in the Kursk region in Russia, Biden commented, acknowledging reports of North Korean forces stationed in that area. When asked if Ukraine should respond if these troops cross the border, he affirmed if they cross the Ukrainian border, yes. Which is interesting because, Biden is notoriously off the politics of non-escalation and generally is just scared of risky moves and is scared of reasonable responses. He's just appeasing Russia and trying to have what I call flatline politics. So this is a pretty new statement coming from him. You know who didn't have a really good response to a question that's similar? Yulia Navalnaya, the Russian opposition leader, and sorry, opposition should have been in air quotes as well. But anyways, she had an interview with Die Zeit in Germany the other day, and when asked if the Western world should still supply weapons to Ukraine, she said something along the lines of, I don't know. I mean, she said it a little bit differently. It was actually something like, I'm not sure how to answer this question, or I'm not sure if they should. It was legitimately a no, veiled into an I don't know. And, I say this all the time, and I feel like this is the time where I proudly want to say, I told you so. And I am speaking to you, everyone who has been telling me that I'm just way too stringent on Russian opposition and that I'm Ukrainian and I don't like them solely because no one is ever going to be good enough. Well, no, I don't like them because they're ineffective. They're not really opposition. They just want Putin's job, but they really do like all of his principles. Like, for instance, Yulia Navalnaya. What do you mean you don't know if the West should keep supplying Ukraine with weapons? So you don't know if Ukraine should be fighting back? Yeah, all of these people are not against Putin because they don't like what he's doing. They're against Putin because they want to be Putin. They agree with all of his imperialist expansion policy, and they absolutely despise Ukraine. There is also a journalist who took an interview from her who literally said, and I quote, she has no sympathy for the Ukrainian suffering. And that's all you need to know next time you try to be a cheerleader for Russian opposition. The United States is set to transfer 2,000 Humvee armored vehicles to Ukraine, as reported by Forbes. Amid heavy fighting, Ukraine has recently suffered substantial vehicle losses, with OSINT analysts confirming over 220 vehicles lost in October and nearly 2,000 since the start of the year. These figures represent only visually confirmed losses, meaning actual numbers are likely higher. With the need for replacement, the U.S. is well positioned to meet Ukraine's demand, as 60,000 Humvees are currently being phased out. These vehicles, recently decommissioned, are not only combat ready but also less costly than modern systems, allowing the U.S. to supply Ukraine without exceeding budget constraints. The Humvee's familiar design ensures quick integration into Ukrainian forces, with over 3,000 Humvees received early in the war. Ukrainian soldiers are already proficient with the vehicle, which is praised for its functionality. Its size and its maneuverability make it especially useful for Ukraine's defense strategy, particularly in urban combat, where it can navigate narrow streets more effectively than larger tanks and artillery. And that is a very good move. I'm honestly surprised that we've only received 3,000 Humvees since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, because it is a very low number. And the U.S. has 60,000 being phased out. 60,000. And yeah, those Humvees cost money, but you know what costs more money? Maintaining them while they sit and rot in a hangar. So honestly, it would not constrain the budget to send Ukraine more of these Humvees. In fact, everything that we get, that you hear being announced in dollar amounts, is vehicles and equipment that is being decommissioned that costs you money from your taxes to maintain and cost your great-grandpa money to produce from his taxes. So in reality, Ukraine is not getting these crazy lump sums of money, or crazy sums of money in general, that you hear about. 90% of that money actually stays in the United States, continues circulating in the economy, and creates jobs. So it's actually incredibly fruitful and productive and profitable for you to send equipment to Ukraine. And we have approached my least favorite, but my most favorite comedically section, the Russian axis. And of course, Russia is a shit show as per usual, but I think this week, they have really outdone themselves. Fines imposed by Russian courts on Google for blocking YouTube accounts have reached 20.88 trillion. 2 undecillion rubles, 2 followed by 36 zeros, an amount that doesn't even exist. This amount doubles every week. These fines were imposed after Google removed YouTube channels associated with Kremlin propaganda media. You know what's funny? Outside of the fact that Russia is trying to fine Google some trillions of dollars for literally banning their products in Russia, Google doesn't exist as a company in Russia anymore on a Russian market. So you can't really fine it because unless the world fines it for doing that, the international courts, they're not obliged to pay anything unless they ever want to come back to Russia, which I doubt they will. Right now, this entity doesn't exist in Russia, so you cannot fine it anything because it's not operational in your freaking country. Also, do you think they care? They don't. It's so funny that Russian propaganda channels were removed and Russia is upset and fining Google for, I don't know, making their special disinformation operation just a little bit harder. But anyways, yeah, Russia outdoes itself with how ridiculous they are every single week. And you know, every week, what also outdoes itself is the amount of fines that Russia is trying to impose on Google. As I mentioned previously, 2 undecillion rubles is legitimately an amount of money that just doesn't, it's not real. It's 2 with 36 zeros. Russia, if only you put that energy and channeled it into development of your own country, and if you channeled it into prosperity, not hate. What you could do with it. For the first time, a drone attack occurred in Chechnya as unidentified UAVs targeted the local Special Forces University. Media reports have identified the university as one of Russia's largest recruitment centers. Also, it's Chechnya, I'm certain. Ramzan Kadyrov is probably stomping in his boots. His Prada boots, I mean. Or maybe they're not Prada boots anymore because it has been 2.5 years since he was trying to wear those to combat. Half of Russia's shells come from North Korea, according to the Times. Surprise, surprise. We're so surprised, aren't we? According to the Times, which cites sources, Russia has become increasingly dependent on North Korean shells following Putin's visit to Pyongyang earlier this year. Western intelligence reports that many of these shells may be faulty, but their quantity has still contributed to some battlefield gains. Meanwhile, the report notes that Russia continues to face heavy losses, with 1,200 personnel lost daily, 480 of these in the battles for Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. And Pokrovsk is a very, very difficult area of the front, but it has been projected that Russians were going to take it 2 to 3 months ago, and they still haven't taken it. So even though this area is really bad, and of course it's a really difficult place for Ukraine, Russia is still not accomplishing its goals. Again, surprise, surprise. And yeah, North Korean shells are faulty. In a lot of cases, they, misfire, they don't get to their destination, they land in Russia, and all that good jazz. But at the same time, they are numbers, and they are numbers that Ukrainian air defense needs to intercept. And every time it gets intercepted, the debris falls and ruins something or someone's life. And it's never good. And unfortunately, on that note, that's all I have for you for today. Please do give this video a like and send it to a friend if you enjoyed this content and want to see more of it. Also, do let me know how you like the new format and, as I said in the intro, any questions, suggestions, criticism, anything, I read all of it and I absolutely adore it. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe to The Gaze so you can see my party face more often with notifications and all that great stuff. And I will see you next week.